How cool would it be to have my retirement fight against the greatest heavyweight of all time at Madison Square Garden, my home crowd? Now, these are words by Jon Jones. Okay, so let's unpack that. The UFC is not going back to New York. I think it's November off the top of my head. It's definitely wintertime, and it's at the very end of the year. So when Jon makes that statement, and he's referred to Stipe many times as the greatest of all time, we assume he's talking about Stipe. When he says my retirement fight, it was alluded to that once Jon gets done with Stipe, that will be the last of his era, last of his generation, and the guys he was competing with. Been speculated that he might be done and retire. Okay, so we think we know what Jon's talking about. How did we get to this point, though? How did we get till November? I mean, for perspective, the first time that this fight was dangled in front of us, the audience, was for T-Mobile on December 10th. That's the first that we heard about it. We roll into the new year. It is Jones. It is T-Mobile, but now it's going to be surreal with Stipe calling dibs. And apparently, Dana and Jones saying, yeah, you got dibs. You got the winner. So then they said July is a date, but that falls through. And that apparently or allegedly fell through because Jon was unreachable. There was a period where nobody could get a hold of Jon. And I got to defend Jon on that just a little bit, because also with this story, right, I'm sure there's all sorts of pieces that we're missing. I'm just talking about the pieces that we have. But within that, Jon had sent a message before he went dark. When the Stipe fight's done, let me know. I mean, to me, that sounds as though Jon just committed to the fight. He doesn't care. He can always make the weight. He's in good enough shape. He certainly wasn't hurt from surreal. He's been out long enough and would like to get paid. I mean, it sounds as though Jon is saying any time. I got the opponent. I understand all the rest of it. I think that Jon committed, but somebody wasn't comfortable. They did not agree that was enough. Okay, great. But now we're going to take that and we're going to move it until the end of the year. That's just a meaningful amount of time. And by the way, that would mean that the heavyweight championship is going to be contested twice this year. Generally, matches are contested and athletes compete 3 times a year. So that will be a return to the ring for Stipe. That will have him out 2 full years. Is that right, guys? He'll be out 2 full years by then. And I'm just wondering what to make of it. It's not as though you have a whole lot of other options. If you got your card done in July, you wanted them, but you didn't get them. You couldn't reach them. Whatever happened, you did reach other people. You've got that done. You move to the next one. If the next one's already full and you got somebody more, you move to the next one. If the next available date that doesn't yet have a main event, which is where the heavyweight title fight is going to go, isn't until November, then that's when the fight is. Like there's nothing here that shouldn't be here. But how do you go underground? And Jon admitted to this. Jon said this to Stipe. Stipe went publicly and said, man, he looks like he doesn't want to fight me. And Jon said, you think just because I went dark for a couple of weeks that I don't want to fight you? How does that happen? I mean, on a different note, I don't get that. And some of you will. Some of you are what we call lazy. Some of you are what we call deadbeats. And you might not want to admit it about yourself, but if you think that it's okay for an adult, particularly a parent of 5, to be unreachable, for what one guy said has been since the fight, which is 7 weeks, and the guy himself is saying was for 2 weeks. If you think that that's okay, right? Now you know who you are. Now you know why life isn't going great. It's not okay. There has never been a day, I'll just assert myself, there has never been a day when I have gone to sleep and not returned every email, every call, and every text. And boy, I gotta be up sometimes. But it's every day, and I'm just offering that for you. I couldn't imagine. I haven't done this. I haven't gone to Jon's social media, his Instagram and his Twitter, but I will bet you if I did, that period where he was dark and nobody could reach him, I'll bet you he was active on social media. So now it's not a matter of putting the device down, I'm going to go be with my family or something like that. I've got the stresses, I got the buildup, but I just got to get away from everything. I mean, this isn't the dude that does all sorts of media to start with. Before you defend it, and I will also just add for you, there's no such thing as disappearing for weeks or months. Not in this sport. You must be accessible 24/7 to USADA. So he had the phone, he had the device, and he just didn't check his texts. It's a really hard one for me to understand, particularly if your boss is trying to get a hold of you to give you a multi-million-dollar job, and he's only called you once in the last 4 years. I mean, it seems as though you wouldn't have a very good argument to be stressed or bogged down, or it's a weird thing. It really is. It's a very weird thing. Okay. Now let's go back to Jon saying this is going to be his retirement fight. That's interesting to me. And it's interesting because I don't believe it at all. Not even a little tiny bit. It would actually be the opposite of making sense. It would make no sense. Jon just had a fight in this division and did not take a scratch against the guy that's beating everybody else in the division. I mean, it's one of these, you don't walk away from that. You keep going out cha-ching. But Jon is now saying it's going to be his retirement fight. So is that his new thing? Is that his new thing to do that? I've never seen. I mean, that would be that'd be very weak. That would be low fodder and low hanging fruit. It is something. It is a conclusion that a dum-dum could come to thinking he's doing something good, right? I mean, in all fairness, it's highly possible that he thought this was a good marketing plan. But if I'm to be fair to Jon, he's never done anything like that before. Jon's never pulled a stunt to try to sell a couple of tickets. That's just not what he does. So is it Jon's last fight? Because not for nothing, that's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And if the division's going to be left, I mean, again, if we think that Jon is going to walk away because he has nothing else to do and or prove, if we think that, and therefore you would retire, that'd also be true for Stipe. Right? For sure. If that's true for Jon and we accept it, of course we have to apply it to Stipe. Now, it's not meaning they both have to do it, but if that's just what we're doing, this is going to be a last fight for two greats. That is an interesting piece of media. That is interesting from a marketing standpoint. I don't know that sells. That's up to you guys. I mean, is that something where you go, I can't miss it, right? Laws of supply and demand. They just kick in and this is the last place of the supply and I demand that I'm going to see it. Is it? Maybe. Or you get a guy that's half out. And that's also where the problem comes. When the guys start pretending with this, I'm done, this is my last one. Whenever you start pretending with that, it starts to become a little bit more true. Because it starts to become at least a consideration. Once it's a consideration, now you got 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Now you got Jon Jones, who is extremely dominant. But if you're planning to walk anyway, there's just not a lot you can do with that. And we've seen this plenty of times. Plenty of times we've had a guy say, this is going to be my last fight. But how many of those have you seen a guy win? It's rare. It's just a rare thing. It's just part of it. You're hungry and you're driven, you're going to keep going, or you're not. You're now in a new position, which is my final walk. Well, how bad do you want to get hurt on your last one? It doesn't take you anywhere else. I mean, when it's time to dig deep, how deep do you want to go? Now, I'm just making these suggestions. Jon is very dominant. If he did something that worked against him even subconsciously, it would be of interest. It would be of it, right? You get this most dominant guy, but if you can start to find things that start to shorten that gap a little bit, perhaps they're talking points. Perhaps Jon really does want to be done. I'll assure you when he's done with Stipe, he is not retired, but he might think it. He might believe it now. Either way, it appears, based on the information we have, the heavyweight championship is going to be contested only twice this year. He had one at the beginning of the year, and it looks like you're going to have to wait the end of the year.